Welcome to the Business Trendsetter podcast, where we teach you how to transform your business through understanding and using trends. My name is Manny Turan.
And I'm Adam Hartung.
And we are Spark Partners. To learn about how to transform your business, how to grow your business, go to our website at sparkpartners.com. So Adam, today we're going to talk a little bit about something on the world stage, but as it pertains to lessons we can learn about business. And that is the situation happening right now in Afghanistan. And so, again, in this podcast, we do not talk politics per se, but we do talk about things that are happening in the world and how they pertain to your business and how you can really look at what's happening in the world to make the right decisions for your business. So this conflict has been going on for a lot longer than a lot of people realize. It's not just 20 years. The whole Taliban situation has been going on for closer to 50 years, with initially the Soviets coming in and leveraging the Taliban to their whims, trying to create a passage to the sea, and ultimately the U.S. after that. And so what are the lessons we can learn about business as it pertains to this horror happening in Afghanistan, Adam?
Yeah, so first of all, I encourage all of our listeners to rent the movie or go to the streaming services and watch the movie Charlie Wilson's War, starring Tom Hanks. And that will give you a very good background on the history of the Taliban and when they fought the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, and then our efforts to support the Taliban in their fight against the Soviet Union. It's a great movie. It's factually accurate, and it's very enjoyable to watch, and it'll give you some really good background. And the second thing I want to make sure is that I reiterate what Manny just said, in that it's a horror show. The future of Afghanistan will be bleak. Everything that I believe in for humanity, equality, education, the opportunity to move ahead, that's going to disappear, I think, under the Taliban rule. So it's a terrible situation there, and we in no way support what's going on with that if they overthrow the government. But I think there are a couple of things that we could start to take away from this message that we could apply in our business. And the first one is to think about how the news correspondents are talking about the speed with which Afghanistan fell. There was a process that had started under the previous administration, President Trump's administration, of reducing our involvement in Afghanistan. And President Trump had announced that he was going to leave the country if he would remain as president. And of course, when Biden came in, he agreed that continuing to stay was not a good idea. He did announce a date that he was going to leave, and everybody kind of thought there would be this orderly transition, I guess, as the U.S. moved out. And of course, it happened very, very fast. Instead of it being a 9-month transition of rule involving the Afghan government, the Taliban, the United States being a broker, maybe some other players in the Middle East being brokers in the situation, it was a matter of days. And in just a few days, the entire country has fallen under Taliban rule. And the big lesson that I want our listeners to take away from this is that this is actually quite foreseeable and very much the norm. When things go south in your marketplace, it always happens much, much faster than people think it will occur. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. For one, we're sitting at a vantage point where we see the world in a jaded way, where we see ourselves as being, important players in the marketplace. And we think as long as we're there, we have a major voice. And what we don't realize is that there's a lot of people around the edges that are eating away at our market. And as they're eating away with innovations and new ways to try to be successful, they're just waiting for us to slip up and in some way say, we're not going to continue to be as competitive as we were in the past. And they don't wait. They see that as the opportunity to leap forward, and they move very, very quickly. And because they take advantage of that gap, they take advantage of that opportunity when there's a slip up on the part of a major player, it turns out that the major player gets routed very, very quickly and the new guy comes in. We can see this in a lot of businesses. Years ago, there were small offset printing presses that were in most corporations down in the basement. If you wanted, 20 copies of a document, you took it down to the basement and they reprinted it. And then along came xerography. And when xerography came in, it was much easier to operate. You didn't have to have, a press operator. You didn't have to make a plate. You just, somebody could slap it down on the machine, hit the button, and you can make copies. And so it was much, far, far easier. Well, the people in the press business said, well, this is going to take years and years and years before it's going to displace us, because printing presses are much more, the quality of the printing is much higher. It's much more efficient. It's much cheaper. And, you get what you want as opposed to some sloppy, bad quality Xerox. But the reality was it only took about a year. In a year, these copiers just started springing up around corporations, like bunny rabbits everywhere. Well, why? Well, it's because, once the printing press operators let the door get open and these copiers started to appear, everybody wanted one. Nobody really wanted to go down in the basement and hand over their document to some guy and talk about plates and talk about how many jobs are ahead and whether they could queue up ahead of the CEO's job, or, nobody enjoyed that. And so once they had an opportunity to shift, they quickly shifted, and it just took a year. And we've seen that again and again. The 35 years to build the VHS DVD business, right? Where you had to get all the people in the homes to eventually have a machine. You have to get all these stores built that has distribution. That didn't happen overnight. It took 30, 35 years to build that infrastructure. Then along comes the streaming technology, which allows you to just download the movie onto your devices and watch it, and boom, it doesn't even take 16 months, and you've really bankrupted the whole VHS, DVD form of entertainment distribution. It always happens faster than you think it will, and that's the big thing I want everybody to take away.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give a little bit of a counterpoint to that. So if you're not the one that's getting market share taken away, then you can be the one taking market share away from somebody else, right? If it's not being taken from you, you can be the one that's taking it away from somebody else. So it's not necessarily an ominous, the sky is falling. These are the facts of business. It took 35 years to build VHS. It took, 5 years to build the DVD framework, and it took 18 months to topple it all down. For sure.
Yeah, I think innovators should be encouraged, because what an innovator should realize is that watch the major players in a market. If the major players' language is talking about how they want to defend the business, here we are, we're General Motors, we have a certain market share of the auto industry, and here are our plans to defend that market share. They're effectively saying, we are no longer really trying to get out there and make our customers super happy. We're not trying to advance the market. We're not really trying to make it a better world for our customers. We're just trying to defend our business as it exists. And that should be a really key signal that, hey, here's an opportunity here. And we saw that happen with electric vehicles. Here's GM, Ford, Chrysler. You've got Nissan, Honda, Toyota. You've got Porsche, Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes-Benz. You have all these car companies. Nobody's doing anything with electric cars. And when asked about it, they said, yeah, we're not going to deal with it. Everybody's got range anxiety. They're afraid that they'll drive out and not be able to get home. How do you do maintenance on one? Where are you going to charge it up even at home? You got to get some kind of a charging device installed, blah, blah, blah. It's never going to happen. And we're going to just keep making the cars we have, defending the business. And what you see there is, Tesla jumps in, an innovator jumps in and says, hey, there's an opportunity here. There's an opportunity because they're not doing anything in this market. And sure as the world, where are we some 10, 12 years later, the world is dramatically shifting, and the original players are becoming dinosaurs, trying to get back into the game and trying to chase the innovator. So you're right. If you're saying, I'm going to defend my business, you need to be scared. On the other hand, if you're an innovator, look for those markets, look for those opportunities where the major players really aren't doing R&D, really aren't doing, product development, aren't trying to create new solutions for customers. They're doing a lot of sitting on their laurels and trying to defend the situation. And that's what people in Afghanistan, the invaders of Afghanistan, meaning the Soviet Union and America largely, have tried to do. They've tried to come in and maintain a position. We used to think in business that you could maintain a position, right? It was kind of like Michael Porter, and the old thought of strategy around 1980 was, hey, get to a big position and then, put up a moat, like get economies of scale in manufacturing or have controlled distribution like the auto companies did by the dealerships they had. Or maybe you have intellectual capital rights, that you can protect what you've done. DuPont built up its empire, and to some extent IBM, on the basis of patents, where they could protect their product line and other people couldn't make the same products they could. And so that was the idea, like, okay, build this moat and then sit back and make the product and clip the coupon because there's no competition. That was the idea, but it's really not true. It doesn't work that way because there's always innovators out there trying to peck away at your business. They're trying to, they're saying, no, you can't just sit there and maintain what you've had, because we're always going to be looking for a way to chip away at the edges and create a crack. So you don't want to be one of those maintain kind of guys. You don't want to sit there thinking, where do I find the moat to protect my business? Because the only way to protect your business is to grow. I mean, that's it. You got to keep moving forward, finding new solutions, keeping your customers happy.
Yeah, and it's one of these things. My 15-year-old son is, and they're great bellwethers for what's happening in the world. They're talking about electric cars. They're talking about augmented reality, virtual reality. They're talking about gaming. I mean, what's in that conversation, that vernacular, is not about a '67 Chevy or a Harley. They're looking forward. They are the future, right? He's 15 years old, and in 10 years, he's going to have the buying capacity to decide to buy a Harley Davidson or an electric motorcycle. We've talked about that in the past. So let's think about what Afghanistan, the quote unquote legitimate government, what could have they done to maintain position, or were they completely outnumbered, outranked? Like, what happened? So I want to put us in the mindset of that legitimate government, which is the same mindset that business owners often have when they're trying to defend their position.
Well, okay, to continue with the analogy and comparisons to business, think of the Taliban as a fringe competitor. It's much smaller than the Soviet Union, or the Russians were, much smaller than the United States by far. So you got a much smaller competitor. They appear to have weaker tools, right? They don't seem to have nearly the quote-unquote firepower of the major competitor. And it's easy to sort of disregard them and say, there's really nothing to worry about. But it's kind of like fighting gnats. You're never going to kill them all, but you don't really have to worry about them. That's the easy route to take. The other thing to look at is to say, well, what's really happening with that fringe competitor? Is that fringe competitor, gaining a few customers here and there, gaining a few applications? And what we could see happening was that the reason the Taliban weren't destroyed in Afghanistan was because they did have friends, and they had quote unquote customers, using our analogy. They had people that would house them. They had people that would feed them. They had people that would keep them secure. And so the thing that what we should have seen was that, hey, these guys aren't going away. They're not going to go away, and they're never going to go away. And in fact, they're gaining friends. They're gaining applications. They're gaining the ability to get into our customer base. So what do we have to do? Well, we have to realize, obviously, we're not doing enough for the customer. We're not doing enough. So, the United States put, lots of money for soldiers and bombs and drones and bullets. But what did we not do? Well, did we build any schools? Did we protect any monuments or shrines or, mosques? Did we do things to protect the heritage of the country? What about healthcare? What did we do in terms of improving healthcare, making it a more healthier place to live? Shelter. What did we do for housing? Did we give people better housing, an opportunity to air conditioning, running water, clean running water, agriculture? What did we do anything to try to improve the crops or otherwise improve agriculture? So those things, if you do those things, what's happening is you're extending your value proposition. You're saying, hey, our job is to come here and to help you lead a better life. And we think that better life, is blah, blah. And so we're going to help you get from here to there. But did we really help them get from A to B? When we stood up this government of Afghanistan, did we really step in and say, hey, we're going to make Afghanistan a better place to live, right? And so that's the important thing that we have to remember as business people. You can never lose sight of the fact that you have to keep making life better for your customer. They have needs. Many times they have unmet needs, and you have to figure out ways to help them meet those unmet needs. If you do that, then you will grow. You'll grow your relationship with the customer will grow, and you will grow if you can continue to look for those unmet needs. But on the other hand, if you say, well, my job is to supply this, and I'm going to supply this one thing, and customer, go get the rest of your needs met by somebody else. They'll find somebody else. And that's one of the big lessons that we need to take away from this is you can't narrowly look at your business. You can't say, well, this is what I do for my customer and just stay narrow. You have to always keep your eyes open saying, are my customers' needs being met? And if they aren't met, how can I help them meet those needs, even if they aren't directly aligned with my historical value delivery system?
What's happening now is interesting with respect to the Chinese and the Taliban government or the provincial government, in that they're trying to come in and say, hey, we don't recognize you just yet, but we wanna be your friend. And if you've seen what the Chinese have done in Africa with infrastructure, roads, and hospitals and things like that, it'll be interesting to see what happens with respect to that relationship on the world stage. So if we think about a company like IBM, we've talked about IBM many times. We've talked about GE many times. These, when I was a kid, were household names, and now, of course, they're not. And so at what point, what's the inflection point where a GE, an IBM, a GM, a Sears could have made a decision to really go in a different direction and remain viable? Where's that point, and why didn't they take it?
Well, once again, you got to get out of this mindset of maintenance that we can maintain. Get away from that and get to this mindset of saying, hey, we have to grow. You know, the economy is going to grow at 3% a year on average, right? Not every year is 3, but, you know, this year's going to be 5. Last year it was 0 or 1, you know, but it averages 3 over the long term. Inflation averages about 3% a year too over the long term. So what that says is right from the get-go, if you're not growing your revenues at 6% a year, money's going somewhere else. Now you say, hey, I'm in an industry that, you know, the industry doesn't grow at 6% a year. You say to yourself, I'll say, well, that may be okay for the industry, but it's not okay for you, because it means that the economy and the money is growing at 6%. It's all being spent someplace. When it's being spent, if you're not getting your 6% growth out of it, it's going somewhere else. That means you're less vital in the economy than somebody else. The money's going elsewhere. And so what we look for is, are you maintaining this growth rate? Now, you need 6% to maintain. That's the bare minimum. But notice I haven't paid any money to my shareholders yet. So I need to make sure that I'm growing a little bit more so I generate more profit so that I can give a return to my shareholders so they don't go somewhere else. Put another 3 points on top of it. So the thing that shocks a lot of businesses, even small businesses, is this idea that you really have to grow at 9% a year just to sustain. If you don't do that, what's happening is, first of all, you'll lose the ability as a business owner to pay yourself any dividends, right? You'll be owning the business, but you're not capturing any rate of return on the capital that's invested in your business. That's the first thing that goes away. The second thing that goes away is how much you pay yourself. And you start subsidizing the business, you know, because you've got a building you own and you don't pay yourself rent. You get a family member to come in and help do some of the work and you don't give them any money. So you're subsidizing the business. Let me take all this way down to the point of just thinking about, say, for example, an insurance agent. An insurance agent working in his office. I say, well, you need to grow at 9% a year. And he says, well, how can I do that? It's not an issue of how. It's you need to find something that you're offering. Because if the marketplace is going somewhere else, you know, because they're buying insurance online, et cetera, and you're not getting that growth, then the money's going somewhere else. So it applies to a small business or a barber shop the same way it applies to anyone. You got to get to that 9% growth rate. And the big inflection point is what we call, caught me there. So the inflection point that's going to happen for these businesses is when you hit a growth stall. A growth stall are 2 consecutive quarters where you either have revenue decline or profit declines, or where the revenue compared to a year ago or profit compared to a year ago is in decline. 2 quarters, 2 consecutive quarters. That's a growth stall. We've got data now going back 40 years that we've accumulated on both public and private companies. And what it tells us is that if you hit a growth stall, you only have a 7% probability of ever getting to a continuous 2% growth rate. about half the businesses are just going to slowly bleed out over time. Like I said, you don't have any money to pay dividends to the capital. You start finding ways to subsidize the business, try to keep it alive, but you're bleeding out the business. That's about half of them, and it'll be a painful death. About a third of them are going to fail within just a few years, right? So only about 7% will ever really reignite. And so I always look at this because I'm looking at a company, and you look at an IBM or look at General Electric. Did they hit a growth stall? Absolutely. IBM had a growth stall and never stopped. It went through 24 consecutive quarters of declining revenues. That's terrible. You're obviously got a problem. Blockbuster, when Blockbuster was $6 billion of revenue and Netflix was just $500 million of revenue, Blockbuster went through 2 consecutive quarters of revenue decline. And they said, it's not a big deal. We'll recover from this. We'll shut down some stores. We'll lay off some employees, and everything will be okay. Well, it wasn't okay. Yeah. Those 2 consecutive quarters demonstrated people were starting to go to the alternative delivery, which was Netflix, which was the fringe competitor, and they were starting to get their DVDs and VHS tapes delivered to the home. And it didn't take long. But it took about 3 years, and then Blockbuster fell off a cliff. And then 5 years after the growth stall, they were gone completely. They had to file bankruptcy, and they disappeared. So that's what we're looking for in business. We're saying, are you growing? Are you growing, and are you growing at 9% or more? Really, that's what you want. And if you're not, we need to figure out why not, and we need to figure out how to get on that growth curve. You need to find something you can sell your customers that meets their needs so that you're getting your fair share.
Let me take this time to remind our listeners that no matter how small or how large you are, all of these things apply. I have conversations with small business owners all the time, and they're like, well, why do I care about growth? I'm just maintaining my small family business. Or why do I care about some of the other topics about trends or about bias or about planning? And the truth of the matter is it applies to all businesses. And so Adam and I created a course called Think Innovation. It's a masterclass that helps you to think like an innovator and really look at these items, these topics in a very systematic way so that you can prepare your business and align it with emerging trends. These trends are not something to just kind of shake a stick at. These are actual things that are going to add or subtract from your value in the up and coming years. So people don't understand that it's just the same. It's the same whether you're a $1 million business, $100 million business, $1 billion business, or even a $10 billion business. It's the same, just the number of zeros changes. Matter of fact, I would say as a small business, you have more chances of growing very quickly, 30, 40, 50% year over year in the first few years, but you always have to maintain at least that 9% growth, make it an even 10% just to keep the lights on.
I mean, you can think about something as simple as a dry cleaners, right? The problem with a business that says they're a dry cleaner is they've defined their business by their value delivery system. We run a dry cleaners business. That's not really what you do. What you do is you help people, with their clothing, with their apparel. You help them have a good, suitable apparel. And that could include alterations, right? How does the apparel fit? But also think about it in terms of all the apparel they have. So people wear shoes, people wear coats, they wear jackets, and the kinds of material that are being used, right? We've seen advances. We used to wear all cotton and wool. Obviously now we use all kinds of blends, and new kinds of materials and fabrics are coming out all the time. So if you were in this business, I wouldn't say I was a dry cleaner. I'd say, what do I do? What are the new kinds of clothing coming out that I can help people be very satisfied with the fact that I'm helping them enjoy their clothing and their apparel and their way of life. So, offering delivery or offering, to have more stores, that's just an expansion of the value delivery system. But really getting inside the needs of the customer and saying, wait a minute, if they're going to drop off their clothes somewhere for dry cleaning, is there anything else that they would drop off? Is there anything I could deliver to them? What could I do that they do on a weekly basis or, some periodic like that basis that I could induce them to do more with me? Should I be offering a small line of groceries or something like that? Should I be matching this up with a takeout service for food? What are the needs of the customer? Don't get tied into, I'm doing dry cleaning, but actually start to tie into what does that customer's need? And, if I should be offering them some food so that on the way home from work, they pick up their dry cleaning and dinner. I mean, that's a service. You're helping people out. You got to think bigger than just what your value delivery system is if you really want to grow and make any money.
The dry cleaner that I use has one of the guys that is partial owner of the dry cleaners also owns a couple in a community down the road from us here, fairly affluent, but a lot of retirees. And especially during COVID, I asked him about what his value was, and he, of course, told me his value delivery. Well, we're just another dry cleaner. And I thought to myself, being able to offer pickup and delivery to these folks that don't want to leave their house, and that's huge. And something else about taking these ideas and going with them, you've got to act quickly, but you also have to act methodically. And so in our course, we talk about something that we've talked about on the podcast called a blank space team that allows you to test out new ideas and new markets in a way that you can actually measure these things to decide if that's where you want to take your company next. A lot of people don't think that way. New ideas are almost forbidden in some of these organizations, and it's kind of a cultural mindset.
Yeah, you should always be thinking, what is it my customers need? What's the next thing I can do for them? There's a lot of people in business, small, medium-sized businesses, and they say, here's my product, give me the money, and that's the end of the conversation. They don't extend that to say, so what kind of problems are you having in your business that aren't being, taken care of well? What are your struggles? Just engaging people, your customers, in a conversation about what they need, and then trying to see if you could take care of those needs. We would have had a very different outcome in Afghanistan if we'd have said, what are your needs? And they said, well, it'd be nice to have clean water. It'd be nice to have good shelter. Gee, I've heard of air conditioning, in homes, and don't have much of that in Afghanistan. Is that possible? I wish I could get the kind of crop production that I see when I look at those fields in America. And you start saying, well, wow, if we service those needs, what would happen? Obviously, it would have been a very different relationship than what it turned into at the end of the day. Afghans dropping their guns and running away at the first sign of a fight. So that's the way we have to think about our customer is, what do you need, right? Not just what am I delivering, or how could I do what I've done better, faster, cheaper, right? Everybody wants better, faster, cheaper, and that's okay. Doing better, faster, cheaper will maintain your business to some extent, but you can't get in that maintenance mindset. It's really about growth. It's really about, how do I grow my relationship with the customer? How do I find greater value for the customer and give it to them? We worked with some guys recently, you and I, that grew mushrooms. And it's one thing to say, I'm raising mushrooms and selling mushrooms. It's a very different thing to say, there's a market out there, restaurateurs who are looking for high protein, low fat foods that could be very tasty, that they could feed their customers and have a great menu with a lot of variety to it, et cetera. And I'm going to help them. And, one of the products I'm going to offer them initially are mushrooms, and not just the white mushrooms, remember, from, the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, but rather, a lot of varieties of mushrooms that can, go to help them towards these healthy foods, organic foods, and towards vegetarianism, vegetarian dishes and vegan dishes on their menu. Could specialize, and we have vegetarian dishes for restaurateurs, so they can have their menu for the carnivores, and have some really delectable dishes for the vegetarians and vegans that come to visit as well. It's a different mindset. So, not saying I'm growing mushrooms, it's saying I'm helping the restaurateur be successful. And that latter one is a pathway to growing your revenues and making more money. Because when you make your customer more money, when you make them happy, then you're going to make more money. That's what growth's all about, is find their unmet needs or their poorly met needs and then fulfill those.
That's a really good summary of what we talk about in our podcast. And so I remind everybody to go to our website, sparkpartners.com. Engage with our other podcasts. Go to our different channels and be part of the conversation. We have a bit of a queue of folks that want to be on our podcast, and that's a really good thing. And so over the next couple of weeks, we'll be offering an exciting conversation with an expert in artificial intelligence. This gentleman has a fantastic background, is going to give us some insights in what's happening in these top 4 trends. We talk about AI, the gig economy, mobility, and asynchronous life. What he's doing in his business is enabling all of those. So it's going to be a fantastic conversation. Then we have another conversation with somebody who has a little bit different perspective on the sales and marketing modality that we talked with Frank Cespedes a number of weeks ago. So a lot of exciting things happening on our podcast. We invite you to send us a note at manny@sparkpartners.com or adam@sparkpartners.com, and we'll be happy to consider your topic as part of our guest series. So with that, Adam, on your final, I will bid you farewell. Have a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. See you soon, Manny.